welcome to Sensible Secondhand Reviews. Today we're actually filming a car of which I sourced an almost identical version a while ago. This is a 2013 Seat Ibiza 1.4 Toca. This originally came with a sort of sat-nav system which is sat on the dash, which is why it was called the Toca. But unfortunately that seems to have disappeared at some point. Nevertheless, the fourth generation Ibiza is a very popular used car at the moment, and it's probably a super mini that you should definitely look at if you've got a budget of between £1,000 and £5,000, which is what this series of videos is all about. So the fourth generation Seat Ibiza had a very long production run. It was actually launched in 2008. So the earliest cars of this type are now 13 years old. They actually finished production in 2017 when the fifth generation Ibiza came out, which is the current one. And there were a lot of engines available. Now, because there were 11 petrol engines available for this car, I'm going to cover that separately when I'm not trying to drive and remember things at the same time. Likewise, there's something like 18 or 19 trim levels for it, so I won't be covering that when I'm trying to drive. I only do that when there's fewer options available. But certainly with this car, it's a 1.4 Toca, which is a special edition back in 2013. And the engine is actually similar to the one in the old Mark V Golf. I mean, it feels absolutely fine. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just not the most modern engine. It's not turbocharged, it's not supercharged or anything like that. And you could get the twin charger engine on this generation of Ibiza that was turbocharged and supercharged. And equally, right at the end, there were the 1 litre TSI engines available, which were little 3-cylinder things, which are used in virtually all small Volkswagen products today. Very similar in platform to the Mark II Skoda Fabia, and I think it's a Mark V Polo, depending on where you are in the world. I mean, people call Polos different things, but it's one that was launched in 2009. Also based on this platform were the Skoda Rapid Spaceback and Seat Toledo, and of course I had a Seat Toledo until 2020, so very familiar with those. In terms of the way this car drives, it's very typical Volkswagen Group fodder. I mean, it's got the same type of gearbox that's in everything. Steering feels quite light. The only thing I would say is that the ride is quite firm. You expect that from the Seat because it's supposed to be the sporty brand, and so you wouldn't expect the sort of most comfortable ride. And it's fine. I mean, it's not the worst I've ever experienced, but it just feels so typical of a lot of the cars I've driven in my life. The early years of my motoring career for a long time were spent with a lot of Volkswagen Group cars, and nothing particularly wrong with that. It's just some people love them, some people don't. It's one of these sort of divisive things. But yeah, it's easy enough to drive around Somerset where we are today, and I can see why people absolutely really like these. I mean, I sourced one of these for a client back in 2018. It was almost an identical car. Who absolutely loved it. I do understand that. It's just perhaps you might want something a bit different, because these are relatively sort of uncommon sight in comparison with the Polo, but there's still a lot of them, and that might be an advantage or disadvantage for you. It really depends on really what your preferences are. But no real surprises for anybody familiar with Volkswagen Group cars. Controls are quite light, clutch is positive, gear change is positive, although it's a bit clunky. Again, it's a common trait with Volkswagen Group cars to be like that. But yeah, just well behaved, and in this form quite docile. I mean, the Cooper and Boccanegra aren't, but certainly this 1.4 is. And no, I do actually quite like it. I think this is quite a nice car. Right, here we are once again in the rather autumnal car park. This red does actually suit this car really, really well. There's certain colours that look very nice on in the Ibiza. White looks quite good, red looks quite good. Even yellow, which wasn't a popular colour for cars, I don't think at the time really, but I think something like a Seat, a little Seat like this, it suits it quite well. Boot's about 292 litres on this, similar to a Polo or Corsa of the time. Trademark Seat badge to open, which I find very satisfying. Having owned a couple of Seats myself, it's always sort of nice. Just put that parcel shelf out of the way, and we'll see if we've got something under here that will make me happy. No, unfortunately we don't. We have a tyre inflation kit. Never mind. Got a boot light though in here, a couple of hooks as well. The only thing I would say is I don't think we've got a 12-volt socket in here. Unless that's a 12-volt socket, maybe that is. Answers in the comments section below. Yeah, it's easy enough to lift up and down. Rear visibility is not too bad. I think you could get models with parking sensors in them. The number of trims though in this car is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think I've ever come across too many of them with so many. Right, we're going to adjust that seat. We need to get in the back, I think. There's not a huge amount of room in that. Let's pull this forward. Actually, I'm going to need two hands. Excuse me, viewers. Right, okay, that's better. Door's quite long, but if you do have someone who's quite tall, is in the front. And Adam, who owns this car, and his wife are both quite tall, so that's why it is like that. And that's driving position I've been using myself. So just bear in mind before you actually buy one of these cars that you might want to just check to see if it's got adequate space for you before you do that. It's about the same as a Ford Fiesta Mark 7, really. There's no rear door pockets in this, that's interesting. And typical Seat of this kind of time, it's all really hard. I mean, it's hard wearing and everything, it's not going to break. The quality is good, it just doesn't feel particularly luxurious with all this sort of cheap plastic, which is a bit of a shame really, because the rest of the car feels quite nice. You know, the fabric feels good and everything. There's no centre armrest in this particular car. I don't think you could get one in an Ibiza of this generation. Maybe again, answer in the comment section below if you know differently. The styling feature here of little side window is quite nice. That steering wheel though, I think it's fake leather. It's got plastic, but it's got stitching on it. Why they couldn't just put real leather on that, I don't know. Or maybe pleather would have been nicer, who knows. Got a little cup holder there for the hand sanitizer that, you know, these days we require. Let's get in the front then, shall we? Right, 16-inch alloys on this Toca Special Edition, which is nice. Yeah, it does look very nice. It's one of the main reasons why you might want to consider one of these over, say, the Mark II Fabia or the Polo of that generation. I think it was the Mark V Polo by that stage. Anyway, typical Volkswagen key of the era. It's quite comfortable though in here. Has the sort of older style Seat steering wheel with that, you know, fake stitching, which I'm not very impressed with, viewers. However, I think this glove box might be very impressive. Do my secret mission documents fit? Oh, come on. Oh no! I can't believe this. Oh, viewers, no! No. Ah! don't think these are going to fit in the door bins either. Oh, viewers, why do we have to deal with this sort of thing? Right, let's just continue and not mention that anymore. Just a 5-speed in this 1.4. For some reason the heated rear window control and the door locking buttons are down here. Strange. And there's lots of blank switches. This wasn't one of the sort of low models in the range, so I don't know why they would have had too many blanking plates for things, but never mind. Interesting sort of Peugeot or Citroen style control here for operating the volume and the stereo and things. That's not very typical Volkswagen either. I don't think I've actually seen it in a Volkswagen Group product before. These though, yes, I've seen these indicator stalk and wiper stalks in all sorts of cars. And, you know, similar thing with this headlamp switch, but I've not seen one with a little red accent. That's very Seat, like the little badge here. Obviously on higher trim models maybe you did get some controls on here of some description, but obviously you don't get it on this particular one. So we're in neutral, the handbrake is on, so we can just turn that on. So there should be a sat-nav unit with this car, which would have come originally with it, but it's been lost in the mists of time. Little sort of screen here. You can see that they really wanted you to use that unit there. Aux input in this particular car, just there. Let's turn that off if you don't need it. Very similar little display in the middle of the instrument cluster here as my old Seat Toledo Mark IV. Interesting kind of vents. It's a nice little touch. I mean, the dashboard looks quite nice, and even some of it is soft touch. I mean, that's soft touch, and so's this actually, which is unusual for a car like this. There's the famous controls for resetting things, and this mirror switch. It's been in all sorts of different cars. Only 2 electric windows in this car, but some people argue you don't need them. Unlike the back, there's actually material on these doors, which is very nice. You don't necessarily get that in all Seats and Skodas and things. That though, there's a typical hard scratchy plastic. Some people don't actually mind that kind of thing. They're not sort of bothered about it, but ooh, yeah, it does bother me. I don't know why, and just the way it goes. I'm sorry, viewers. I get funny about certain things like that. Right, let's go and take a look at the engine, shall we? So, quite, for the time, an older Volkswagen Group engine in this car. 1.4, well, it's something like 80 or 85 horsepower. Different things, say different power outputs. I think this is supposed to be 84 or something, but it's somewhere between 80 and 85, I think. With a cam belt, this particular one. Not very complicated engine though. I mean, in comparison with the things like the twin charger engines you could get with this, or the Eco TSIs or the three-cylinder TSIs that also came in the 4th generation Ibiza, this is quite a simple engine. I think all you've got to really do is just make sure the cam belt's done regularly and it's regularly serviced, and it would give quite a good service. This car's not done many miles, so it's only done about 46,000 miles, so it's not a particularly high mileage one or anything. I do like this front end, although the post 2015 second facelift ones look even better than this. And then the famous Volkswagen Group coolant reservoir. It's been in cars since the mid-1990s. So if you ever need to replace one, that's not difficult really. But yes, all the sort of things for checking are pretty easy. I think this has got electronic power steering in it because it's very light. Strange reservoir for the windscreen washer fluid. Right, time for another drive, viewers, I think. So, kind of driving along in this, it does feel comfortable for motorway use. It's quite easy. The refinement is definitely there. I just wouldn't say it's as fun as something like a Mark 7 Fiesta, but we have covered on Sensible Secondhand Reviews before, and you know, they had a very similar production run, and again 2008, 2017, they're pretty much the same sort of thing. It will just depend on your kind of preferences to what sort of car that you like, and in Germany for sure, where you know Ford and Volkswagen very much go up against each other as they do in many countries, they were sort of seen as really quite deadly rivals, which they were, I mean, more so the Polo than this, but effectively this is just a Polo, that's what it is. Although Volkswagen looks clever marketing, which suggests that this is aimed at a slightly different person from the Polo, maybe a bit less sensible and things, but ultimately that's what it is. I mean, the Cooper versions are interesting, the FR ones are probably too, but this one will suit so many people's needs. They won't particularly be concerned about some of the hard plastic in the car. They won't be maybe concerned about the fact that the engineering is shared with so many other cars. They'll just say it's quite cheap to run, it looks nice, and it's easy to drive. And a lot of people, that's really what they need. That's what they like. Particularly if you're familiar with Volkswagen Group cars, then all the controls are easy to use. They're placed quite well. It's just perhaps it's not the most dynamic and exciting car. Maybe I was expecting this to just drive a little bit differently, maybe a little bit more sort of pizzazz. But then, if you kind of have the ingredients that you do and you sort of put them together, it's not really a surprise that you just get something that feels very familiar, just a little bit firmer than it would do otherwise if it was a Skoda or a Volkswagen. We're going to have to cover these engine options and trim levels separately, because I can't possibly remember all of these whilst I'm driving around. There were so many engines for the 4th generation Ibiza, and of course we're just going to talk about the petrol ones anyway. So the 1.2 originally 70 horsepower 3-cylinder, and a 1.4 4-cylinder like this one with 85 horsepower, although I think I've mentioned it's somewhere between 80 and 85 depending on who you ask. Later there was a 1.2 TSI engine with 105 brake horsepower. There were two 1.4 twin charger engines, which are both turbocharged and supercharged, one with 150 horsepower and then one with 180 horsepower. Later on, the 1.4s got replaced with what was called the Eco TSI, 140 horsepower with cylinder deactivation, and then a 1.8 with 190 horsepower. Those tended to be things like the Cooper and the FR. The 1.2 4-cylinder TSI was actually replaced later on with some 1-litre engines, which are the same as in the Seat Me and Skoda Citigo and Volkswagen Arp and the Seat Toledo and all sort of thing. So 1 litre of 75 horsepower with 3 cylinders, and then the top of the range version of that was 110 horsepower. That only came, I think, in the Ibiza this generation with the DSG gearbox and FR trim for some bizarre reason. The main one though was a 95 brake horsepower TSI unit. It's better than 75 brake horsepower MPI normally aspirated engine. That's a very slow engine. And then accompanying the 1.2 TSI, which would have been around the time of this facelift, this car's 2013, but it was facelifted in 2012, so about that, a TSI with 90 horsepower, later replaced with that 1 litre. I told you it was very confusing. What's even more confusing is the number of trim levels that this car came in. I mean, it had a 9-year production run, so maybe it's not so surprising, but there's Loads. The S, the S Copa, the SE, the SE Copa, the SE Technology, the Toca, like this, not Copa, Toca. The Soul, the Sport Rider, the Cupra, the Bocca Negra, which was a Cupra with a funny front end, like on the old, I think it was called the Seat 1400 Sport in the 70s. The Chill, the Connect, the FR Edition, the FR Technology, the Good Stuff. Seat Ibiza for Good Stuff. The iTech, the Sport, the Vista, the FR Red Edition, and then the Cupra Black. It's worth saying as well, there was a 3-door version called the SC, and that's a slightly smaller boot at 284 litres. So viewers, should you consider the 4th generation Seat Ibiza as a sensible second-hand buy? You do have to watch some of the engines. The 1 litre 3-cylinder ones can suffer with something called wet timing belt failure, because I think they have a chain, and they have a wet timing belt in them, which is bathed in oil, which sounds like a bad idea for some reason. And I get a bit suspicious of those, really. Also, the 1.2 engines, they are on a similar system, although I think they're chain only. This engine is a cam belt engine, so you've got to watch that. But apart from that, they're plentiful in supply. The ride's quite firm in this, but it depends what you want. I mean, it's a very stylish car. It's comfortable enough. The rear seat's a bit cramped. That might be something to watch if you're, buying one of these and you've got a family. But they are nice to drive, actually. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode of Sensible Secondhand Reviews. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Please don't forget to like this comment and, like this video and leave a comment below. Also, turning on notifications really does help as well. And see you again soon for more sensible secondhand motoring.